Hello, everyone, and welcome to this online event, Transforming Bodies, a panel discussion on tattooing practices, featuring the wonderful Zoe Black, Maria Viirros, Sialuk Jacobsen, and Mallon. My name is Tonje Kjellevold, and I am a project manager at Norwegian Crafts, where I have had the pleasure of working with The Vessel, our online magazine on crafts and material culture, since its inception in 2021. We have published 8 different issues of the magazine, working with more than 100 different contributors, all looking at different aspects of contemporary crafts. This event is programmed by Norwegian Crafts and Objectspace in collaboration and held in connection with The Vessel 7, Transforming Bodies, edited by artist and tattooist Maria Viirros and published by Norwegian Crafts. Our collaboration with the Auckland-based gallery Objectspace, and especially with their deputy director, Zoe Black, who is here with us, stretches back a fair few years. Zoe was our curator in residence here at Norwegian Crafts during the Corona years, and since then we have collaborated on several projects, visitor programs, exhibitions, and talks, fostering connections between Norway, Sápmi, and Aotearoa, New Zealand. I'm so happy to kick off another year working with Zoe, who will take us through our panel discussion after Maria, Maya, and Sean have made their presentations. We are looking forward to hearing 3 presentations by our experts today, all highlighting their different interests in relation to tattoo practices. Maria Viirros is an artist and tattooist from Finland. Their work explores tattooing as a tool for accessing, archiving, and mediating social identity and community relations. As mentioned, they were the guest editors for the 7th issue of The Vessel, titled Transforming Bodies, focusing on tattooing and body modification. Also making a presentation today is Sean Mallon. Sean Mallon is an anthropologist and is currently Senior Curator Pacific Cultures at the Museum of New Zealand Te Papa Tongarewa. He curated Tatau, Samoan Tattooing and Photography in 2019 and co-authored Tatau, A History of Samoan Tattooing with Sebastian Gallio in 2018. Finally, we have Maya Sialuk Jacobsen, a contributor to The Vessel 7, edited by Maria. Maya is the founder of the research and dissemination project Inuit Tattoo Traditions. She has 23 years of tattooing experience and works as a traditional Inuit tattoo artist. She has taught and tattooed in Greenland, Canada, and Alaska, and her research covers all Inuit territories in the circumpolar north and draws on her cultural roots and language, as well as literature, ethnography, anthropology, and archaeology. We are looking forward to hearing from all of you. Right now, we'll be moving into some short presentations, starting with Maria and then moving to Maya and Sean. Afterwards, Zoe will take us into the discussion part of the program today. And if you have any questions along the way, please just save them for the discussion parts towards the end, when we will open up for questions from the audience. So thank you so much, and I will leave the word with Maria.
All right. Hi guys, happy to see that there's so many of you tuning in. I think Zoe is controlling the PowerPoint presentation here. I was the guest editor for this issue of The Vessel magazine, and what I thought that I will be doing for my presentation, I'm going to begin with showing a bit of my own work, and then I will just go briefly through the contents of the Transforming Bodies issue. So I'm just going to show a couple pictures. It's 8 pictures, so you can just probably go through them as I speak. It doesn't really matter in which order it comes from. So like Tonje was saying, I'm a visual artist. That's my background. I was a professional printmaker before I went into tattooing, and this is probably quite visible in my work as a tattooist as well. I would say that I'm married to mark making and the materiality in tattooing, so I'm really interested in just working with the ink and working with patterns and working with this sort of, how to say, the decorative part of tattooing. You can just go ahead and switch the images. The references for my tattoos come from all over, so it's quite open the way I work with my tattooing process. I look a lot of natural patterns. I read a lot of text, poetry, stories, folklore, things like this. I also look a lot of visual arts, and always try to sort of seek out whatever could be taken from the world around me and put into my work with tattooing. You can just go ahead. This work was referencing sort of like a branch pattern, so you can really see everything is quite organic and fluid in the movement of it. Just go ahead. And currently I'm looking a lot at medieval body armor and sort of the way a tattoo can be used as a protective material on top of the skin, if that makes sense. You can go ahead. The people I work with tend to have this sort of strong sense of self, which is really important in the way I work with the people I make tattoos for. And it's something that I'm trying to always capture in the tattoos I'm making for people. I would say in comparison to the rest of the people working in this issue, my works are quite individualistic in the sense that it's always about finding what is important to the person who is wearing the tattoo that I'm making for them. It's a lot about discussion, what they wish to sort of evoke in the work, and how we can make that into something visual that they can mark on their bodies. Just go through more. Thank you. There's this sense of personal connection to the work, and maybe it's not so obvious what the work represents for a person looking at the tattoo, but for the wearer itself, it's always quite important to me that the tattoo and the act of making it is being the witness for whatever the story the wearer has for their own tattoos. Just go ahead. It's quite varied. Every line is really made for a single person and their body, and it doesn't necessarily tell a story in itself, but it tells the story of the body. So in my work, the body is the main thing. Just go ahead. And this is obviously central in all tattooing, and it really leads us to transforming bodies issue as well. And I'll now go through the different participants in the issue. So we commissioned 6 articles with work by 8 collaborators who all approach the same things that I spoke about in their own way. And I'll just go through them now. We began with, a bit ahead of time. There's the tattoo archaeology article by Deter-Wolf, who is connecting tattooing to the historical branch of art making. He talks about ancient tattooing and how tattooing is the oldest recorded craft and art form in human history. And then we can move on to connecting to the past, reclaiming Nordic heritage through tattooing with Jannicke Wiese-Hansen and Svennevig, who in their article speak about their work with Nordic style tattooing and how they are taking those historical references from traditional Nordic tattooing and making it into work in their own contemporary practices with tattooing. And then Maya's article, she will probably show a bit more about her own work. She wrote about Inuit tattoo traditions and the complexities of a revival. Maybe we can go through that with Maya's own presentation, but at the core of it is the significance of tattooing practices in the indigenous cultures for the people of Greenland. And then to have a bit of a younger perspective in the magazine as well, I commissioned a text with artists Elise Nedal and Linn Grønnerøe, who represent the younger generation of tattooists. And how they introduce elements from other fields like illustration and pop culture in the work of tattooing, and also talk about the generational shift that has been going on in the past years in the field of tattooing. And once you've read those, you're going to find an article by Marita Wikström, who's a body modification artist and a scarification artist. And her article is probably the most physical one out of all the text we have in there. It goes into her work with scar making and how she works with the body as the direct material for making the artwork. In addition of talking about the craft of the scarification, she goes into the psychology of pain and how body modification can be used like a tool to elevate oneself mentally, I would say. And then finally, the issue finishes off with Touka Voodoo's presentation of his own work with tattooing. This is a really strong, I would say almost political type of text, and it becomes sort of an autobiographical description of how in his life tattooing has become his main voice for bodily liberation and sort of combating stigma around bodies and gender roles and things like this. So it's really, I would say, a wide selection of really different kinds of perspectives. It's a real like a body modification potpourri, if I could call it that. So I really recommend you all go through it and read all the text bit by bit, so you can see a bit of the selection we have. Okay, so that's it. I think it's a really short presentation, so I'm gonna hand the mic over to Maya. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Thank you. I hope the sound is okay. I have a bit of an echo. Is it okay? All right. My name is Maria Sialuk Jacobsen, and I am from Greenland, and I work with the Inuit tattoo traditions. I'm a researcher and a practitioner, both. So I've done the research to my own people's tattooing practice for about 15 years now. So it's pretty in-depth. And start out by telling you guys that it is a female practice. So it's women tattooing women mainly. It is, I couldn't help thinking, listening to Maria, that it is the exact opposite of her work. It is not about individuality and own identity markers and such. It's community and it's tribal, and everybody gets the same tattoo basically. You can change the picture, please. So this is basically where we are at. This is a map from the most northern tip of North America and a little bit into Siberia. So we have Inuit territories in Siberia, in Alaska, in Canada, and in Greenland. And the tattooing practice covers all the territories. And it is from Siberia, it has migrated with the people into the territories in Alaska, Canada, and Greenland. The tattooing patterns and the tattoo method that we are using is older than our culture. There has been more cultures living in these areas, and everybody used the same patterns. Obviously, I cannot prove that they were tattooing them as well, because these cultures are pretty old. But if you go to the next picture, this is a small mask from the Dorset culture, which is the culture that is right before the Thule culture that all Inuit descend from. And this mask has lines in her face. There are tattoo patterns that are used in our culture as well. And she predates our culture with almost 3,000 years. So if you change the picture, this is Canadian Inuit women, and they are photographed with traditionally made tattoos. It's not from the revival, it's from the original practice. And it had continuity from the beginning of our culture until mission and colonization. And the colonization happened in our territories in a variation of periods. So in West Greenland, where I'm from, it's very early. In Arctic Canada, it's later. So that means that we actually have color photographs in the archives of traditional tattoos. These are ancient tattoos, but they're also within Technicolor. So it's a long span of tattooing. But yet, in the short time that colonization has forced a break in this practice, it has been almost completely forgotten. And that is a colonial mechanism, of course, that we are forced so quickly away from our original culture that we forget very quickly the old culture. But yet it was right underneath the surface, and we have such a huge archive as Inuit people that I have a pretty easy job finding the patterns back. Analyzing the patterns and figuring out what their purpose was and what each specific pattern means is, of course, much harder. And that's why I've been at it for 15 years. So next picture. The tattooing practice stems from the original religion, and that is animistic. And we still today have sort of an animistic view on the world. And as many other animistic religions, there is how do you say it? Amulets are really important as a part of the religion, and men and children would wear like loose amulets that they had in their clothing, on their tools, etc. And women had their amulets tattooed. So this is a drawing of a cluster amulet, and Sean, that's how I get past not having permission to use the photographs. I just draw them. So this is a cluster amulet, and it's from Siberia, so it's in the beginning of our culture. And I would like you guys to note the inverse Y shapes that kind of look like the letter Y, because if you go to the next picture, you can see that inverted Y is used in our tattooing practice. What was a loose amulet is also a tattooed amulet. And this is a birthing tattoo. She would have, it's the beginning of one. It has to go all the way down to her knees, and there will be these horizontal lines with amulets hanging on them all the way down to her knees, which are supposed to bring luck and a good life for the child that is birthed. And the idea is also that the woman can endure the birth better if she can endure getting the tattoo. And the last thing is that the idea is that the first thing the baby sees when it's born is something of beauty. And these thigh tattoos, I have made them on the arms of midwives because the mothers don't have the birthing tattoos. The midwives have them on their arms now when they receive the babies. And I think that's a very beautiful example of using the old practice nowadays. Next picture. The finger tattoos are the most prominently used now. Everybody has them now, and they are like a very strong identity marker for Inuit. But really they come from the creational myth of the ocean spirit in our religion. And she had her fingers severed and was drowned, and that's how she got to live on the bottom of the ocean. It's a very brutal story, and all our myths and in the oral tradition are quite brutal when you read them nowadays. But so they are used today as some sort of an identity marker, like saying, I am Inuk, I'm from Greenland, I'm from Canada, I'm from Alaska. But it has a part of the old purpose with it still. As you can see, there are several hands in each picture, and that's because the women will come and get tattooed in groups. It's usually an elder woman and younger women, and they're usually related. So it's like a mother and her daughters are getting it together, or the aunt and the niece. And the little picture with the teddy bear in it, it's a young mother who got her tattoos, and she brought her daughter, who was way too young to get tattooed. She was drawing on herself with a marker, but it's important that the child is there, and that kind of still is going on. There are a few loose amulets on their hands as well. Oh, sorry, next picture, okay. It's okay. These tattoos I made at the National Museum in Copenhagen, and they are looking a little bit different. They are from a very early phase of our religion, and these type of tattoos were used on the St. Lawrence Island in the Bering Strait between Siberia and Alaska, and were found on a mummy that was 500 years old. And but if you go all the way to Greenland, which is kind of like the other side of Inuit territories, they use them as well. And there's nobody in between that does. It's the most western and the most eastern tribes are using them, but nobody in between. And this area that is in between, it's all of North America horizontally, you know. So it's quite strange that they are appearing in those two places so far from each other. And these tattoos are from East Greenland. They are similar to the St. Lawrence tattoos, but I have them from a description from a Danish doctor in year 1900 who met up with a group of people that were not yet baptized, and they were still heathen, and they were still using the tattooing practice in East Greenland. And he described the tattoos in great detail, and I could simply, with a Latin dictionary, transport them onto paper, like draw what he wrote, and then I tattooed them, and I think they're quite stunning. And they have like the dot work and the circles that are so important in our religion. Next picture, please. The very last thing I want to say, I know I'm a bit over time, is that the tattooing methods that I am using are the traditional practices of stitching or sewing the tattoos. And if you, the last picture, I also made a replica of an awl. I'm not using this in my tattooing practice, but I used it on myself, and just out of research curiosity, I made the replica of the awl that we also use for tattooing. So we're sewing and we're using this tool. And that's all from me. Thank you.
Hey, my name is Sean Mallon. I'm of Samoan and Irish descent. Samoa is an island, an archipelago of volcanic islands, almost in the center of the Pacific. It's north of New Zealand and southwest of Hawaii and east of Papua New Guinea and New Caledonia. So we're right in the middle. But my interest as an anthropologist and as someone who's not a practitioner is to think about the contexts and meanings and places where Samoan tatau or Samoan tattooing exists. And I've dedicated a large part of the last 20 years or so to researching this topic and trying to bring it to various audiences around the world. Some of you will be very familiar with Samoan tattooing. Despite the arrival of European missionaries and a whole range of other interactions with other Pacific peoples and different processes of colonialism and the movement of people and ideas, Samoan tattooing was one of the few tattooing art forms in the Pacific that persisted. But it also changed and it has a history. And my interests have been to bring that history to light and to share it widely with different people. But the two main family lines of tattooists in Samoa are the Sa Tuluena and the Sa Su'a. But there's also a third line, Liai and there are a range of complicated situations where various people have popped up and are have made claims to have some kind of control or ownership over the art form. But I guess in this short presentation we can say it's a contested one. The two main forms are the pe'a and malu. The male, of course, wears the pe'a and the woman wears the malu. But there are other forms such as taulima, which are wrist or armbands, and talvai, which are anklets. Then there are many other popular forms if you look at tattooing in Samoa, maybe not Samoan tattooing, but tattooing in Samoa. There's, love hearts, names, various popular forms associated with high schools, different villages, different groups. So, I'm interested in the cultural specific forms, but I'm also interested in tattooing as a practice among Samoan people. In the mid-late 20th century, Samoan tattooists have been very active as new forms of transport, and the establishment of a Samoan diaspora. Communities overseas have grown. And of course, this comes hand in hand with improved telecommunications, computers, internet, and also people traveling and showing an interest in tattooing in the Pacific region and Samoa. So American and European tattooing enthusiasts have done a lot to take Samoan tattooing overseas and celebrate the practitioners and the art form itself. These are some examples of the types of tools that Samoan tattooists use, and they involve dipping in ink, pigment, and tapping the tool and perforating the skin. And this is done by an expert, of course, and it usually involves some ritual and ceremony and can extend from a few days to several weeks, depending on how regular the work takes place and how many people are being tattooed, and just the schedule of the tattoo master, the tafunga he is called. And you can just see some of the craft that goes into making these tools. By the 1990s, they were starting to use perspex and other synthetic materials in the construction of the tools, because they needed to be able to work internationally at conventions and other places where there was different standards of hygiene and just safety for patients. So over time, even since the 1990s, there continued to be developments in the material culture of Samoan tattooing, the tools themselves, and those material culture changes speak to the conditions of globalization and the spread of ideas, and how the external world and the global flow of information has affected Samoan tattooing, as well as the preferences coming from within Samoa itself, from the makers and the tufonga, the experts. My colleague Sebastian Gallio has written a little bit about these tools, and he talks about the cultural loss that comes with the replacement of indigenous materials with materials like plastics, and now they used soldering needles to make tools. So he's written about some of the skills and craftsmanship needed to make the old tools disappearing as the globalization of tatau proceeds. Here's just a few small moments in the history of Samoan tattooing that really sort of seen it move with Samoan communities overseas, but also attract interest from other places like Tahiti and the Austral Islands. And Samoans have been involved in helping revivals in various parts of the Pacific get started, and there are people using Samoan style tools around the region. So perhaps one of the more interesting elements of that history is the trip of Suluape Aleva Apatelo to Rome in 1985 to a tattooing convention organized by some of the big names in European and American tattooing. And that was really one of the first entrees, if you like, of Samoans into the European tattooing circuits that just expanded in the 1990s and into the 21st century. Here's a photo put in by Mark Adams. He's a very famous New Zealand photographer who followed the tattooing experts for over 40 years. And he captured some of the context in which Samoan tattooing took place in the diaspora. And here he has a photograph taken in suburban Auckland in New Zealand. And one of the leading tufonga, Suluape Paulo II in the blue, and his relative in the red. There's another family photo of various people being tattooed. And of course, Samoa has attracted its interest from Europe. Here's a Dutch tattooist who is being tattooed in Samoa, and you can see the Samoan who's supporting him there has got Samoan tattoos and European style tattoos on his arms. So there's a lot of cultural exchange and fellowship amongst tattoo enthusiasts, not just the wearers, but also the tattoo artists themselves. And here you can see Samoan at the same convention being tattooed with an American eagle by a female tattooist who I've forgotten her name. And I don't have it in my notes, but if anyone knows, you could let me know. I'd really appreciate that. And of course, the fellowship between Europeans and Samoans and other Pacific Islanders and Samoan tattooists have led to people getting titles and recognized as cultural experts and being incorporated into the tattooing families in Samoa. And that has its politics and complications, but here's a famous photograph, or famous occasion rather, where a number of people representing France, Hawaii, Samoa, the United States, the Netherlands, and Aotearoa were incorporated into the Suluape branch of the Suluape family of tattooists. Here's a number of Samoans wearing their malofie, their tattoos. And these were taken at two different festivals about several years apart. And festivals have been a place where tattoo has been displayed and where its revival and its significance has been celebrated and communicated to a broad audience. And festivals have played a big part in the continuation and flourishing of the art form. And of course, you can't stop people wanting to be like Mike. or to wear Nike, and in places where in the 1990s where you might not be able to get some shoes or afford some shoes, the next best thing was to tattoo yourself alongside the taulima or the armband that was very popular. And this is just an image that I took on the street of a young fellow, and it just sort of captures the craziness of the global flows of information and imagery. And for us today, tattoos appear on the body of athletes. They appear on television. We all know this. We see them all the time, and tattooed someones are a part of that mediascape where the images of tattoo travel the world, from people like these sports stars in Australia and New Zealand through to megastars like Dwayne Johnson, The Rock. There's a range of meanings and contestations and significances that are given to our Indigenous tattooing traditions. Over the course of my studies over the years, I've come to realize just how contested Samoan tattooing is and how it has a history, and people tend to emphasize the continuity but forget about the history, and that across the diaspora and in the global situation, it serves many different purposes, and to suit people's circumstances in their lives in different situations. People ask me about what to do about this globalization of te tau, and I try and tell them it's out there. You're never going to bring it back. You can't control it. And there's a lot of anxiety around that. But I think that I tell people, if you want to protect te tau, is to persist in protecting those ceremonies, those contexts where it has the most meaning for Samoan people, because they are much more difficult to replicate and to perform in the global milieu. And as long as they keep working for Samoans in terms of their identities and representing their experiences, I think that's what we have to live with in the contemporary situation. And that's just that's the last slide, but that's just a short sort of synopsis of what my research interests have been. And I'm very grateful to have the chance to share a little bit of that with you.
Thank you so much, Sean. Zoe, I will hand over to you, and as we move into this discussion part of this session, you are very welcome to ask questions in the chat or by raising your hand or putting something in the Q&A, and I will leave it to Zoe, I think, to find time to look at them, because I know Zoe has a lot of questions prepared herself. So yeah, take it away.
Thank you, Tonje, and Norwegian Crafts, and of course to our presenters for sharing their research and work here. As Tonje mentioned, I'm Zoe. I'm sitting in Aotearoa, and I'm from the gallery Objectspace. We've been working with Norwegian Crafts for a few years, as Tonje mentioned in the introductions, and it's a privilege to be helping the conversation here this evening in Aotearoa between Maria, Maya and Sean. What I wanted to do first is acknowledge that the practice of tattooing comes from a very deep and complex history, and it's so specific, as we've heard, to the places in which we live and work. And speaking out about these ideas within an art and craft space can be surprising for some. And Maria, you mentioned in your editorial in the Vessel issue that you wanted to kind of scratch deeper into how this relationship between tattooing and art can be teased out within different spaces. And I'd like to just offer thanks to Maya and Sean for also showing the multitudes within tattoo practice and how embedded it is within cultural expression, and how we can start to consider more widely and broadly on a global space how tattooing sits within cultural expression and within art practice. It's quite current in Aotearoa for this to be the case, for it to sit within these spaces, but I know in a global space it's different depending on where you are within the world. I think it's also necessary to mention that these practices are cultural and reflect connections between many people, but when we're in a space like this and discussing ideas, that we're speaking from our personal experiences and understanding, and not on behalf of everyone within communities. So it's always a reflection of individual ideas and instances, and how we interpret our understanding of these things. I thought we could start, Maria, with a little bit more of an insight into what you wanted to achieve with the vessel issue. And one of the first things that you started off with your editorial was talking about how tattooing is one of the oldest recorded forms of craft, and it's evolved through societal and cultural changes in communities across the globe, but that you also wanted to try and position these articles within the vessel as a way for tattooing to reclaim itself as a craft practice and an art practice. And obviously your relationship to printmaking gives you an insight into that, maybe different from other tattooing artists that you know. So I was hoping that you could, give us an insight into what you wanted this article and this or this issue and these series of articles to achieve in that space.
Oh yeah, definitely. So I think it's really important for people to understand the sort of time when we started working on this issue. So it was a bit over a year and a half ago that Tonje contacted me and we started working on this. And what happened a couple months before that, I was finishing my master's degree. So I was actually right prior to working on this issue, working on both on my fine arts master degree and working as a tattoo artist. So the situation I was personally in was really high contrast, in the sense that at the same time that I was in the academy battling for this sort of fine arts status for tattooing, I was also working in a tattoo shop, which was really anti-fine arts, if it makes sense. And I felt like I was fighting the same exact battle in these two different worlds, and seeing the connections that nobody else around me seemed to be sort of noticing, or maybe they were ignoring it, or whatever the case might be. And it caused a lot of frustration in me, because it felt so obvious to me that it's the same thing. Like, there is no divination between sort of fine art, high craft, and this sort of communal folklore. It's like, it was stupid to me, and I was really frustrated, and I felt like that bridge was missing. So I took the opportunity for making this magazine as a way of just putting it out there, that what if we're in the same group? What if it's not so different?
And what feedback did you, as the process kind of went through and the issue was released, was there a understanding or a sense that some of those bridges could have been connected through the things that were offered through the issue?
Yeah, definitely. I feel like amongst the participants in the issue, I think everybody agreed with me. Everybody was, yeah, it makes that total sense. But they're also at the other side, for people who maybe wanted me to quit what I was doing, for maybe people wanting me to step back. So it was definitely, the contrast is there. It raised a lot of argument, I guess. But I think most of the people working on it are really wanting also to build those bridges, which I was really positively surprised by.
Yeah, and I think some of those, probably those struggles or those tensions that you were feeling is similar to other ways in which underrepresented making practices within craft in relation to a fine arts sort of community can often feel those same things of being ignored or being pushed to the side. And it's really, I think, through writing and through publishing and through critical discourse and discussion where things can be seen in a different way. And Sean, I was hoping to talk to you about that in relation to your really successful and, acclaimed book on Tatau. That was one of the first sort of really substantial dives into tattoo practice within an academia context. And could you talk a little bit about how your research and positioning some of these things in different ways has helped tattoo really hold on to that significance and that cultural importance that you spoke about in your presentation?
Thank you, Zoe, for those kind words. I mean, in a way, I'm sort of relieved that the book came out when it did, because as you would probably recognize, since 2018, 2019, the talk and the art form of Samoan tattoo has just flourished, as has Tamoko Māori tattooing and other indigenous forms in Aotearoa. And it's become very difficult, even as a person of Samoan descent, to write about this topic when there's so many other places like social media, documentaries, and other publications where you can get different points of view. And that's good, I think, for us. But there's a lot of heated debate around different things, and it's just one, and Sebastian Gallio, who's based in France, is another. But we tried to, the politics of doing a book like that was to bring many different people along with us. So we had 17 other contributors to that book in a much smaller way, and over half of them were women, and just about, I think, the majority of them were Samoan. So, and part of that desire was just to capture, it was not to fix the history or the stories of Samoan tattooing in concrete, but to show how diverse they were and how varied and contested and what different kinds of voices sounded like around what Samoan tattooing means. You know, as my late wife used to say, history doesn't belong to historians. And I really believe that. And so that was an effort on Sebastian and my part to try and make the history of Samoan tattooing multivocal and contested. So that's why we called it too, A History of Samoan Tattoo, because it's not the history, it's a history written from a certain range of viewpoints. But you could rewrite that book tomorrow and get a different grain to it and a different range of perspectives.
Yeah, kia ora, Sean. I think that's a incredibly important point in saying that when it is written down, and Maria, you will know this from publishing an article or the issue of the vessel, and then having that as a cornerstone or a signifier that people will refer back to, but it is just what is reflective of that moment in time. And with such an expansive history that tattooing has, it's so important for us to think about the context in which things are written, and that it can be in flux and move and shift as cultural trends shift, like with everything else. I wanted to touch on the relationship between Samoan tattoo and Inuit tattoo and tattoo, and Maya speak a little bit about how community and that resistance to individualistic tattooing is so important within your research and how your tattooing practice has developed. And I think there's such strong connections with tattooing practice within Te Ao Māori and across Te Moana Nui a Kiwa, the Pacific, and all Indigenous cultures, in using tattooing as a way to signify relationships to whānau or family or tribal geographical relationships. And Maya, I was hoping that you could talk a little bit about why you were so drawn to tattooing as a research focus within what is a really rich and deep cultural expression within Inuit culture.
Well, I was a tattooer already when I started doing the research, and I don't know, I'm born with some kind of a bit of a rigid stance, I guess, and I understood pretty quickly during my research that it was a community thing, that it was female, that it was about collectivism and not individualism. And the tattoos simply don't have the language to emphasize one individual's viewpoints or status in life or whatever. It is a group thing. So it's not like I was insisting on it, but the tattoos are insisting on it. And I'm just following their guidelines, really. But where my rigidness comes in is like, I do not feel like I have permission to change that in order to accommodate 2025 version of how people move around in the world, like from an individualistic place. At the same time, we are busy nation building in Greenland. We are busy identifying as Inuit after 300 years under Danish rule. So we need that community. So for me to change that would be silly, really. The tattoos are telling us what to do, so I'm just doing that.
And you mentioned that you've been researching for the past 15 years, and obviously your tattooing practice has continued throughout those years. Could you talk a little bit about the changes that you've seen in how people react to traditional tattooing in Greenland over those 15 years? In Aotearoa, as Sean mentioned, it's a very different space here than it was 15 years ago. And it's really phenomenal to see the changes in understanding and acceptance of traditional tattooing practice. So I'm keen to hear how you've seen things change over this time in Greenland.
Well, it was very quick. When I was in Aotearoa, I was amazed how many people you guys are. You know, in all of Greenland, we are 56,000 in an area that it's huge, you know. So the sheer amount of people that you guys are gives different circumstances to a tattooing practice, obviously. We are so few that we went from this is frowned upon to this is what we need in 2 weeks' time, basically. And it has, in those 2 weeks, gone from you cannot hold a job if you have facial tattoos or tattoos on your hands to, well, of course you can, as long as they are traditional. You know, it was just super quick. But what happened after that was that it was kind of politicized, and the people outside of our people viewed the tattoos as some kind of like political idea on, we want independence, we want to get rid of the Danish monarchy, we want, you know, and obviously some of the people that are tattooed and taking culture back have these ideas and are very outspoken about them, but there are even more people who are just so hungry for their culture, but they don't necessarily have the need to voice the urge for independence out loud or be an activist or whatever. They're just regular folk who needs to embrace their culture again. So I'm kind of in between those two, and I constantly have to fight being placed in the political group, because apparently taking back your culture and reopening a practice is a political step in a post-colonial world. I had no idea that I was stepping into that little wasp nest. So I'm kind of navigating in this, but also insisting on my research and dissemination being apolitical, so that everybody can use the tattoos, everybody can come to me, whatever their opinion is. Maybe they love the king, maybe they prefer things this way, maybe they're super Christian, maybe they're not at all interested in the politics, you know, but it's still their heritage and everybody should have access to it. So my own personal politics are kind of separated from my work. That's what I have had to do. And yet I'm often placed in the political corner by the media, and you know, every time Trump wants to buy Greenland, I'm called up by the media, you know.
I think that's a really nice sort of circle back to the beauty of the art of tattoo, because you're driven by the love of the symbols and the expression on a pure visual sense, and the politics, they sit there, and they, of course they will sit there, but for you it sounds, my interpretation is that it sounds like you're drawn to the essence and the beauty and the artistry of the tattooing in its most pure form, which is
I am obviously, but I am more drawn to the history, and I'm drawn to like cultural preservation, because the tattooing is the only practice we have that is purely female, and it's the only practice that is telling us the history of female, of the female group from the culture developed till now. We are maybe one of the most researched people in the world, but it's mainly the man. It's the hunting, it's the tools, it's the ability to survive in the Arctic, which is a very hostile environment. But the role of the woman is kind of neglected in the story of us. And the tattoos are telling that story. And I am dead set on preserving that story. I'm also dead set on digging it up and telling it, but also I don't want it to be changed by the political circumstances. You know, it is a beautiful history that we have never been told. And before I have the chance of telling it, it is being changed into a political power tool. That's what I'm fighting. And the tattoos are also being changed by the individualistic mindset that is creeping in with the westernization of our people. So I have to kind of fight both of those things in order to try and disseminate the history and the mindset, the worldview that the tattoos are such a good storyteller of. So that is kind of my, so the aesthetics and the symbols and all of that, I'm there to preserve it, I'm there to protect it somehow, and not just let it loose, which is something I actually learned, you know, 10 years ago when I met Sean the first time, and I was meeting all these Pacific tattooers, and I was listening to their worries about pattern changing and concept change, and one by one, many of those tattooers have told me afterwards, stay with it. It is a very big job to clean up after you make all those changes in the name of individualism and people who want to say I have 3 children or whatever, that has nothing to do with the practice, but has to do with their story. And all of the tattoos are valid, if you ask me. They're all beautiful, and they're all identity markers, which is something we really need in the nation building phase of our people. But as a researcher and a practitioner, I just have to try and protect we are very few, and I'm the only one doing that. So it moves so quickly that I kind of have to fence it in, if you know, and protect it. So that's my idea. But I also said to Sean 10 years ago, well, if you put it in a book, it will just die. It will go to sleep inside that book. And there's a long story behind that, but I'm kind of still wondering, how am I going to do this? And I have been writing a lot since, you know, in those 10 years, but I have still not made the book because I worry so much what that will mean, what language does it need, and I'm doing this on my own. I don't have a colleague. I don't have like someone I can talk to about it. I have to figure it out by looking at all the other peoples that are taking back their tattoos and how they're doing. And the Pacific is valuable to us for their experience that is so long. They started so long ago with taking the tattoos back and bringing them to Europe and all that. So how do we do that?
It's such a complex and as Sean mentioned, it's a tense space to be in, because as you described, you're wrestling with all of these different influences, and the focus on what you are trying to uphold and maintain and preserve and amplify is fraught with all of these ways in which it can be co-opted by so many different things. And I applaud you for having the strength to be able to take this on and do it. But I know that the women who would be part of your community now would be so incredibly grateful for what you've been able to bring back to them. I know it would be incredibly important and one of, you know, the most everyday reminder of who they are and where they've come from. So I hope that your research will continue and your practice continue, and you're able to put those barriers up to those who are trying to influence it negatively, because it's incredibly important. But as Sean mentioned, the co-option and the ways in which those tensions manifest and can cause issues within community is really easy. And Sean, I don't know if you wanted to add anything into that conversation.
I think everything you've both said is really relevant and very important, and I'd like to acknowledge just not only is the Inuit tattooing traditions, not only are they a beautiful, stunning tradition, the way you talk about it, Maya, is so moving and beautiful as well. And I really hope that you find someone who can you can work with, and that you can get some of this down. Just even writing about your experiences and the thoughts of what goes into the problems you're facing around, and the way you're weighing up different decisions and the politics of it. That is a valuable part of the tradition itself, you know, the history of Inuit tattooing. And I mean, in New Zealand and Aotearoa right now, there's been a lot of social media noise in the last few months about people from other groups appropriating Samoan forms and saying, you know, this is the Tongan woman's tattoo. They're calling it the malu, Tongan malu, but it's based on a Samoan form. That blew up in the media, huge over here. There's even smaller conversations about whether hand tattoos were just for men or just for women. And, you know, when you look at the history, some of these questions can be answered. But what it just shows to me in a bigger picture is just how it's not just the tattooers who make the meanings, it's the people around them and the communities that make the meanings, and everybody fights about it. And you know, I think given the smaller group that you've got there, Maya, you know, it's just for the Samoans, I just think it's irretrievable and just so difficult to pin it down and to settle on one set of universal meanings, one understanding that's universally accepted of Samoan tattoos history. It's irretrievable. So that's why I say protect those contexts that matter to you. And whether you do it differently than the Samoans down the road, that's up to you guys to sort out, as long as it has some meaning for you. Because it's just so heartbreaking to see how slippery this is. And but nonetheless, it still serves a purpose for Samoan people wherever they may be. But it's not. Sometimes it's not good history. But you know, I can just put down what we've managed to find and let people ignore that or work with it to serve whatever they need in the present.
Well, I think Sean is right that it is so important also to document what is going on right now. And I did not realize that. I was in London talking a few years ago, and I actually was there with Sebastian that made the book with Sean. And I was talking to him about all these issues. And he was the first one who said to me, well, then that is how it is. Then you as a researcher, you note that down, and that's your job. And I was like, what? Yeah, you're right. Where I didn't realize that I was not just some kind of gatekeeper for the old ways, or, you know, but I'm actually there to document how it's coming back as well. I just felt that we had such a fresh start. I mean, we started late, and we are few people. It seemed overlookable compared to the Pacific, and yet the Pacific's deep experience in bringing practices back was something we could lean on. But because we have internet, this information, it's just flying. And so it goes so quick that I quickly realized, okay, I'm old and slow. the younglings are just full speed on, and it's out of control, and it's out of my control, and it's what Sean says, just protect those things that can be protected, and tell people to use the aspects that are important to them.
There's a comparable situation, though, when Maya talks about how people want to utilize Inuit tattooing for political purposes. When Samoa in 1962 was made independent, that was also a time of a resurgence among Samoan tattoos, because people saw it as an expression of their commitment to the Samoan culture and the Samoan way of life. And it became sort of like a symbolic bloodletting, but all around 1962. But now you move a few decades ahead, it becomes it's changed. It's less political and it's more an expression of your identity within a diaspora. When you're so far away from the homeland, you want to show, I'm Samoan. Look at what I've done. And even getting it with the Samoan tools, you know, you can get tattooed with a machine, but people seek out the tools because that's also a way of bringing the past and a Samoan lifestyle or culture so far away in time in a group of islands that many Samoans haven't been to who live in the diaspora. It's about closing that distance between the technology and the culture and the craft, and making you feel a little bit more connected. So, and also when I put up a slide saying that the Samoans went to Tahiti in the 80s to perform at the Bastille Festival in Tahiti, that was part of trying to revive Tahitian tattooing in a colonial setting. So they were utilizing tattooing for political purposes too, at a very important time in their history. And so there are some parallels here. When Maya talks about the struggle and the political desires of some parties to utilize Inuit tattooing, it's happened in the history of Tahitian and Samoan tattooing too, although those histories are different.
But there's another parallel. I see also a greater request for tattoos by the Inuit diaspora.
Oh,
It's
interesting.
kind of like if you live the life on the land, you do not have the same need to tell who you are. You just are, you know. But the more mixed people are, like with Scandinavian blood, or if they don't live on the land, they are the ones who are getting tattooed mainly.
Oh, that's really interesting.
There's also a parallel too that I've noticed when I first started researching Samoan tattooing with what Maria was mentioning about it being recognized as an art form. I had some Samoan cultural people, people who are involved in the art say, well, why are you even interested? Why are you putting these tattooists on a pedestal? They're just tattooists. You go to the village, that's what they do. They're not artists. But it was really interesting coming as a new researcher to hear this debate that other art practitioners in different fields in the arts were wondering, well, why are you turning these tattooists into celebrities? They're just service providers. It was that kind of thing. So that was back in the 1990s when I first started looking at this topic. I mean, that's changed now. A lot of the conversations around art practitioners are treating them as tufunga, cultural experts, as artists. And it's just so interesting. For some people, they're not.
Yeah, and I find it really frustrating because I feel like it's such an unnecessary object, and it's just getting in the way of everything when we're just constantly focusing on these categories, whether it's art or is it craft or is it whatever, because it's human life, it's human culture. It doesn't follow these categories, and it just drives me crazy. Always it's the same question: is it art or is it whatever? But we need to break it, and that's why we're here, I guess.
I feel
Absolutely.
that
I
people
think
often contact me asking for permission to use the tattoos for other things, like in artwork or on cookies. I had a woman writing me if she could bake cookies with the tattoo patterns on them, and I'm like, I'm not your mother, do what you want. But I'm kind of put in a position as the gatekeeper as well, but within questions where I'm actually trying to get people to make up their own minds. I'm not the owner of the tattoos. I'm just the researcher of the tattoos. And also white people contacting me asking if they can get tattooed, very apologetic and scared, but still doing it. I don't say yes, I don't say no. I just have the conversation with them. And usually they back off themselves. They're like, oh, I totally shouldn't. You're right. But really, I didn't say that. They come to the conclusion themselves, but they are doing it through a conversation with me. And I guess at some point that conversation won't be necessary anymore, because I was taught tattooing by a white tattooer who was a specialist in Pacific tattooing. So I was looking at this guy for years. We even had a Maori guy coming to our shop working sometimes, and they were just sitting next to each other doing this. And I was like lacking the language of cultural appropriation and all that. So I just sat there looking at it and thinking, well, if he says it's okay, I guess it's okay. But why does he want these tattoos? How are they significant to him? I was so confused. But this was in what, year 2000, So a lot has happened since then. And a few years ago, a year ago maybe, my old teacher wrote me and he said, I'm getting slaughtered online. I've been doing this for 30 years and suddenly I'm not allowed anymore. And these kids are just white kids, Pacific kids, all the kids telling him to stop doing what he's doing. So things are changing.
I think it's through conversations like this and understanding how different communities have navigated these tensions, and Sean's touched on it a few times, and Maria, you've also touched on it throughout the issue of these tensions that exist within communities, and how, as you say, Maya, sorry, the gaining the vocabulary and that way of expressing that kind of feeling that you have that something is not right. And I think as we have more discussion and dialogue and see the ways in which others are talking about cultural practice and the boundaries and sort of relationships that need to be in place for it to be safe, then we're in a position to be able to navigate those different ways of working ourselves. And I can imagine for artists that it's a really difficult space for people who have grown up or been working for such a long period of time in one way, and then all of a sudden they are finding it like your teacher. But I think there is ways in which practice can move and evolve for individuals as well. That's necessary as people gain confidence in the way in which they can express what they see as right or feels culturally safe in different ways. And I think the vessel and these sorts of articles and issues and conversations and dialogues are so helpful in gaining that understanding for everyone to feel as though they can confidently assert what they are feeling within a space. So Tonje, I'm aware of the time and that we've gone over, but also that the conversation is so fruitful and could continue on for a long time. I don't think we had any audience questions, but if there is, please feel free to throw them into the chat. But I thought we could wrap up just with any final thoughts or considerations from our discussion tonight. And Maria, maybe you'd like to start.
I'm really happy that this happened. I'm really I've been watching a bit on purpose because the whole point of this issue for me personally was to give space for other people as well. I feel like I'm personally in a really privileged place because I have this sort of institutional backup for whatever I'm doing, and it's a bit strange thinking about it because I'm maybe around half the age of Maya, for example, who is sort of like a heavyweight in comparison to me on what she's doing. And yet I feel like I always have this sort of, how do you say it in English, like legitimacy in what I do because I have a degree and I have these sort of things on my CV or whatever. And I feel like a lot of tattooists, and especially indigenous tattooists, sort of lack that spotlight. So I'm really happy that it's like, I hope it feels like you've gotten whatever you wanted to get out of this. And I really, yeah, I'm proud of what we did. And it's been really interesting hearing you speak about your perspective.
Kia ora. Maya.
Yeah, I'm just curious where it goes from here. And I'm so grateful for these platforms that are opening up, and things have been changing so much in my lifetime, from being completely isolated against our will to an open world to a people that are demanding isolationism again. But so I feel like everything that is an open platform like this, just grab it and use it, because we've been isolated long enough, and it is such a privilege to talk to people from such different worlds, different areas of the world, but also different worlds, and I'm super delighted to see Sean's face again.
Well, I think the next step is, Maya, you need to come back down to Aotearoa because it's been many years, and it would be great to have you back down here and see what has changed since you last visited. There will be a lot, I'm sure.
I'd love to. Yeah.
We'll have to start a conversation about that. Sean, I'll give you the last word.
And actually, there is a question for Sean now in the chat, so maybe we can fuse this this question with some final reflections from Sean. I don't know if you can see it in the chat, Sean.
I can read it.
Oh, perfect.
The question is from CJ. He says, I'm interested in Sean's dual heritage, being born in Belfast myself and living in England, and wondered if he'd found any overlaps from Irish traditions and cultures within his research.
I'm very proud of my Irish heritage and my mixed heritage, but I haven't looked too deeply into the Irish tattoo histories, but it's something that's in the minds of my nephews and the next generation of my relations, including my own son, who are trying to think about how a lot of them are tattooed, but they are interested in their Irish heritage and how to express that on the skin. So I may learn more in the coming years and months. I know my own son and my godson are planning to go to Ireland later this year, so that's important there. But I think there's a lot. I just wanted to say, aside from that, that I'm really grateful that we've admitted this conversation, or that you guys have created space for this conversation in relation to craft. My knowledge of European craft history is minimal, but just from the little I know, I think there's a lot of crossover. I pointed to the Samoan family lines of tattooists, and they are like European guilds, and they are cut through by the politics of who's included and who's not. There's the upstarts, the innovators, there's the conservative people. There's so much that's very similar, and it's interesting that over centuries we're still talking about these kinds of politics within these beautiful art forms that we all love. And even just talking about tatau or Indigenous tattooing as an art form is something of recent times, just to consider it even in a conversation of art tattooing is something that's not that old in the Indigenous discourse. So it's wonderful that your organizations have created space for us to ponder that and to shed light on some of the things we're thinking about, and that obviously have been played out in different ways in Europe for centuries. So very grateful to be virtually beaming into Norway and wherever else everybody else is. So thank you so much.
Kia ora, Sean. Ngā mihi nui kia koutou. Thank you so much for sharing so generously tonight, and I'll pass it back to you, Tonje.
Yes, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure listening to your presentations and hearing your discussions. And the whole starting point for this and for the vessel issue that Maria developed was precisely this, looking into the relationship between craft and tattooing, and not caring too much about the different boxes that we like to put things in, or is it art, is it craft? This is a long discussion in and of itself in the contemporary craft field, but there's a lot of interesting things to find if you just ignore all of that noise and look to the practitioners and the communities instead and see what comes up. So thank you everyone for attending as well. I've posted the vessel issue 7 in the chat. All of the vessels issues are online and free to read. So if you found this discussion interesting, which I'm sure you did, then there's lots more to investigate. So have a nice morning, have a nice evening, have a nice night. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Tonje, for arranging everything.
Thank you
so
you.
much.
Kia ora,
Bye.
thank you. Ka kite.
Bye-bye.
Kite.